Good morning and welcome back to Miracle Readiness. And my name is Natekokernot, and I am here to lead you through the COA version of A Course in Miracles. And we are on Chapter 3, Sane Perception, and today's lesson, I think, or today's section is Section 9, and it's called The Fear of Teaching. The Fear of Teaching. Ken Wapnick explained that this section's material was originally about a class in abnormal psychology, which Bill was scheduled to teach at the undergraduate campus of Columbia University. Adding that Bill always had a morbid fear of public speaking, from Absence from Felicity 261, which is a biography of Helen Schuckman that Ken Wapnick wrote. Its discussion of the fear of teaching, then, was originally directed at Bill and will not be directly applicable to all readers. Though since we are all meant to be teachers in some sense, many of the principles discussed here are generally applicable. See Cameo 17 for more details. Just so you know a little bit more about who Ken Wapnick is, he stepped in kind of towards the end of the writing, stepped into Bill and Helen's life and kind of became the first ambassador for A Course in Miracles, the first real teacher of A Course in Miracles, giving lectures all over the place. And he also was heavily involved in the editing process for the FIP version. As a teacher, if you become concerned with totally irrelevant factors, such as the physical conditions of the classroom, the number of students, the hours of the course, and the many elements which you may choose to select for emphasis as a basis for misperception, you have lost the knowledge of what any interpersonal relationship is for. And this footnote reads, since the material in this paragraph follows immediately after the last line of the previous section, the implication seems to be that when the teacher loses sight of what any interpersonal relationship is for, he has done so because he sees totally irrelevant factors, such as those listed above, as having power to dictate his perception of himself. Paragraph 2. It is not true that the difference between pupil and teacher is lasting. They meet in order to abolish the difference. At the beginning, since we are all still in time, they come together on the basis of inequality of ability and experience. The aim of the teacher is to give pupils more of what is temporarily his. This process has all of the miracle conditions we referred to at the beginning. And I'm not going to read that. He's just referring to the miracle principles in the first chapter. And the teacher, or miracle worker, gives more to those who have less, bringing them closer to equality with him, at the same time gaining for himself. And that footnote just lists off a number of miracle principles that you could read, about 5 of them, if you wanted to get more familiar with this concept. And it is definitely true in my experience that I notice how incredibly spirited I become after a teaching session. How full of spirit that I become. Like I'm doing my morning workbook lesson with a couple of students, pupils, and it's the highlight of my day. Um, it it it's like as you teach, you learn is basically the gist of this, and really that is the fastest path to learning stuff yourself is by teaching it. But I also want to make clear that teaching is mostly done through demonstration, not through lecturing. So you have to receive these messages from God. You have to truly accept that you are the light of the world, because you can't give what you haven't actually received yourself. So when you know you have it, teach it. And when you're not in that right-mindedness, you're teaching anyways. You are demonstrating that to the people around you, and basically teaching what you know in that moment or what you falsely know in that moment. But the receiving is both steps. The receiving of God's messages about yourself being the light of the world is necessary so that you can turn around and teach other people that they're the light of the world. What we're in the contrast to that, which is what the ego is doing, is basically teaching other people that they're guilty. And sometimes we're not even conscious that we're doing it in very subtle ways where we're kind of asking other people to feel guilty in a lot of our communication. The confusion here is only because teacher and pupil do not gain the same things because they do not need the same things. If they did, their respective, though temporary roles would not be conducive to mutual profit. Freedom from fear can be achieved by both teacher and pupil only if they do not compare either their needs or their positions in regard to each other in terms of higher and lower. Presumably, children must learn from parents. What parents learn from children is merely of a different order. Ultimately, there is no difference in order, but this involves only knowledge. Neither parent nor children can be said to have knowledge, or their relationships would not exist as if they were on different levels. The same is true of the teacher and the pupil. Children have an authority problem only if they believe that their image is influenced by the authority. This is an act of will on their part, because they are electing to misperceive the authority and give him this power. And this is kind of in reference to the last section that we read about kind of accepting the image that you have assumed, like either your parents or somebody else has placed on you, their misperception of you, and you identify with that misperception. Say they tell you that you're a terrible communicator or something like that, and you internalize that message and then dim your light as a result. That's exactly what he's cautioning against in this lesson. A teacher with an authority problem is merely a pupil who refuses to teach others. A teacher with an authority problem seems to be one who is so uncomfortable with being an authority that he either partly or wholly abdicates the role of teacher. This is because he has given his pupils so much power over his self-image that he feels wounded by their negative perceptions of him. He wants to maintain himself in a position where he can be misused and misperceived. This makes him resentful of teaching because of what he insists it has done to him. The only way out of this particular aspect of the desert is still to leave. And that's just a reference to where he says that in the first place, which is one of the miracle principles. The thing to do in a desert is to leave. The way this is left is to release everyone involved by absolutely refusing to engage in any form of honoring error. Honoring error means giving someone's erroneous perception of you the power that only truth should have. It is the same thing as siding with anyone's misperceptions of you, as the previous section says. It can also be like if somebody's complaining about victimhood or something, that you can listen, and this is what I practiced as a therapist and still do with a handful of clients that I still see. Somebody's either giving you a victim story or whatever. In no way do you want to ever affirm that victim story. You can kind of nod your head to indicate that you're listening, but you don't affirm it. And that's also in reference to a kind of exercise that Nook and Corrine talk about during their TTC course of the hallway, where you imagine yourself kind of walking down a hallway with the light, this just bright shining light at the end of the hallway, and that is where you're heading. And all along the hallway, there's these different doors, and inside of each of these doors, there's a room where, like, a loved one of yours or a friend of yours is watching a movie of their life with all the drama and all of the misfortune and victimhood that's in it, and they're trying to pull you into their room to watch that movie with you and get really like deeply engaged with it. What I would call false empathy. Actually a term in the course where it's like if we see our brothers suffering, our brothers down in the well, what we tend to do is go there and sympathize with him and like, yeah, that's awful. Or, yeah, that person really is a schmuck. That's the type of empathizing that the ego takes part in. And we're being asked not to honor anything like victimhood or sickness. Somebody tells me they're sick. I just nod my head. I neither affirm nor deny it. I think denying it, telling them they're not sick, is probably kind of going on the other side, making an error on the other side of things. You simply don't need to honor that, and you don't need to affirm that. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit like walking a tightrope. Neither teacher nor pupil is imprisoned by learning unless he uses it as an attack. If he does this, he will be imprisoned whether he actually teaches or learns, or refuses to engage in the process at all. So everyone is teaching. I'm going to find a quote here that is from chapter 6, section 1, called the Lessons of Love, is chapter 6 in the Message of the Crucifixion, in paragraph 3. You have been asked to take me as your model for learning, and we have said that an extreme example is a particularly helpful learning device. That would be his crucifixion that he's referring to. Everyone teaches and teaches all the time. This is a responsibility which he assumes inevitably the moment he has accepted any premises at all, and no one can organize his life without any thought system. Once he has developed a thought system of any kind, he lives by it and teaches it. Okay, so again, the receiving part is one, recognize that this is a just entirely different thought system that you're learning from this course. And the more that you believe it, the more you want to step into authenticity and demonstrate that you believe this. But egos are typically going to react very negatively to this and try to dim your light, essentially, try to put you back in your place. That's what the ego does. It's kind of out of that sense that they are not invited in to the gates of heaven, is what egos think. And they're projecting that onto you whenever you suggest that they and you are both welcome in heaven. Um, so we're demonstrating whichever one we believe and teaching whichever one we believe. And he's saying, by demonstrating this as you believe it more, you will believe it even more, and gain everything in the process. I think we're on paragraph 6. The role of a teacher, properly conceived, is one of leading himself and others out of the desert. Jesus may have in mind the image of Moses here, who led his people out of the desert. The wilderness of Sinai is a desert, and indeed is often translated the Sinai desert. The value of this role can hardly be underestimated, if only because it was one to which I very gladly dedicated my own life. In which I very gladly dedicated my own life. I have repeatedly asked my pupils to follow me. It's a quote from Matthew, and he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." This means that to be effective teachers, they must interpret teaching as I do. I have made every effort to teach you entirely without fear. If you do not listen, you will be unable to avoid the very obvious error of perceiving teaching as a threat. he's really like, there's a place in The Chosen, which is kind of how I've gotten familiar with the life of Jesus instead of the Bible, like rereading the Bible, those three chapters, Matthew, Luke, and John, that there's a section in which he sends them off to start teaching, and he also explains to them before he sends them off in pairs to different parts of the Middle East. And their only instructions are one to, first of all, give talks, right? Which is kind of the thing of the day. Like lots of teachers would move around and settle in on a public square and just start preaching. And he wanted them to do that, and he also wanted them to perform miracles, to realize that he was giving them the power to perform miracles, and they did. And also, his other instruction was to trust. He said, don't go with even an extra shirt. Just carry, and no money. Just carry like what you need on your back, and trust that everything is going to be provided for you. Paragraph 7. It is hardly necessary to say that teaching is a process whose purpose is to produce learning. The ultimate purpose of all learning is to abolish fear. This is necessary so that knowledge can happen. The role of the teacher is not the role of God. The confusion is all too frequently made by parents, teachers, therapists, and the clergy. It is a real misunderstanding of both God and his miracles. Any teacher who believes that teaching is fearful cannot learn because he is paralyzed. He also cannot really teach. You would be right to maintain that this course is a prerequisite for any rightful course you may teach. However, you would really be saying much more than that. The purpose of this course is to prepare you for knowledge. So is the only real purpose of any legitimate course. All that is required of you as a teacher is to follow me. Whenever anyone decides that he can function only in some roles, but not in others, he cannot but be attempting to make a compromise which will not work. As the first sentence of this next paragraph makes clear, this applies only to the roles you have properly undertaken to fill. If you are under the belief that you are coping with your fear of teaching by functioning in related roles, but not as a teacher of students, you are merely deceiving yourself. And this is directed at Bill, who felt able to accept functioning as an administrator and as a teacher of interns, but not as a teacher of students, a classroom teacher. You owe yourself greater respect. There is nothing as tragic as the attempt to deceive oneself, because it implies that you perceive yourself as so unworthy that deception is more fitting for you than truth. Either you can function in all of the roles you have properly undertaken to fill, or you cannot function effectively in any of them. This is an all or none decision. You cannot make inappropriate level distinctions within this choice. You are either capable or not. This does not mean that you can do everything, but it does mean that you are either totally miracle-minded or not. This decision is open to no compromise whatever. When you say that you cannot teach, you are acting as if universal laws apply to everyone except you. This is not only arrogant, but patently untrue. Universal laws must apply to you, unless you do not exist. We will not bother to argue about this. I think that's all about authenticity, and recognizing how often we are being inauthentic simply for the point of dimming our light, because in this false humility, we believe to shine too brightly is going to make other people dislike us. Probably because we've had experiences, all of us, in the past of shining our light too brightly and having other people scold us or make remarks, and then we've internalized that's not all right to shine brightly. And authenticity, I think, is something that changes as you move through this advancement of trust. But once you really start to feel that trust, you do you are really, really encouraged to become a fully authentic teacher of God and stop affirming the things that you hear other people saying that you know just aren't true. Paragraph 11. Descartes engaged in a very interesting teaching procedure, and one from which he himself learned a great deal. He began with doubting the existence of everything except himself. René Descartes engaged in a process in which he systematically doubted all that he believed in order to arrive at a piece of sure knowledge that was impossible to doubt. He arrived at the famous cogito, I think, therefore I am. He insisted that his own existence was not open to doubt, and rebuilt his entire thought system on this one premise, I think, therefore I am. It is noteworthy that he arrived at accepting the entire system he originally doubted, solely on the basis of this one piece of knowledge. There was, however, a distinct shift in his own perception. He no longer really questioned the reality of what he perceived, because he knew he was there. Perhaps you are not too sure of this, but for this reason we suggest that you concentrate on "Here I am, Lord." And he's giving several examples in this footnote of places in the Bible where that's said. I'll just read the part at the end where it says, "This prayer was also used by Brother Lawrence, the 17th century monk whose practice of constantly reminding himself of God's presence is recorded in the classic, The Practice of the Presence of God. His form of the prayer was, 'My God, here I am, all yours.'" And that's see Cameo 1 for when Jesus first recommended this prayer as a meditation method for Bill. Affirm your own existence, in other words. Repeat this very short phrase and don't think of anything else. Just pull in your mind slowly from everywhere else and center it on these words. A teacher is unlikely to be effective unless he begins with being there. This is not really open to question. You will lose all your fear of teaching and relating in any form once you know who you are. There is no point whatever in remaining in the prison of believing that this is up to you. You do not exist in different lights. It is this belief which has confused you about your own reality. Why would you want to remain so obscure to yourself? So don't shrink from this thought that you are the light of the world and that your function is actually to save the world. And to put that in perspective, because that seems like an awfully lot to take on, think of it back to the Donald Hoffman heads, the virtual reality headsets that I talk about all the time, that all the images that you are seeing are images that you constructed. And so your sister or your wife, your spouse, they're seeing a different world than you are. They're seeing the images that they constructed. So the world that you're really trying to save is the world inside your virtual reality headset. Uh, in other words, that's all you're gonna ever experience of this world is your perspective on it. But as you change your perspective on it, you are starting to see a much brighter world with far, far less conflict and all of the other dismaying things that we hear about in the news. And, you know, if I tune into the news, I can definitely conceive of a very chaotic world right now. If I stay in my light and walk around teaching and demonstrating that lightness, and this is true of my experience, I don't see any conflict. I might hear sirens in the distance, but I don't ever witness firsthand any conflict anymore, and I don't really experience any myself. So I hope that that's helpful. I mean, these sections are definitely added. These are not in the FIP condition because the first editing team, which was basically Helen and Bill and Ken Wapnick, with Jesus's guidance, they decided to leave a lot of this stuff out, feeling that it was just directed at them personally. So it's maybe not as generalizable to everyone. Like a lot of people probably aren't going to resonate with this difficulty of dimming our lights. Um, but I'd say it is definitely needed for some sets of ears to hear these messages. And once we get past chapter 3, and we're pretty close, I do believe we enter into the parts that were not added, essentially, in the COA version. I think I read yesterday there's 44,000 words added to the COA version that were not in the FIP. And I would guess that the vast majority of those are in these first 3 chapters. The miracle principles, especially, like that is a long, long section, and it wasn't in the FIP. It was like a page, maybe 2. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day full of blessings and miracles, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.